Well, welcome everyone to another community conversation, the truth about compliance with non-functional turf and water conservation. Our presenters today are Amy Talbot and Zachary Castagnola Johnson, Esquire. And today is December 4th, 2025. My name is Dave Zapponi. I'm the CEO of ECHO, otherwise known as the Educational Council of Homeowners. And I want to say welcome to everyone who's a member of ours, and those that aren't, welcome as well. And we appreciate all of you attending today and participating in this particular program. ECHO is a statewide nonprofit association established to support HOA board members and engaged homeowners. Our mission is to foster a better quality of life in community associations through education, advocacy, and connections. For today's event, we have a few housekeeping items. These are now presented on your screen. Take a look at those really quickly if you wouldn't mind. In addition, slides were sent to all registered attendees prior to today's webinar. Please take a moment to review our housekeeping items. And if you have any questions, you can always ask Connor in the chat. He'll be happy to help you. In fact, the chat icon is to be used to report any technical issues you may have and to communicate directly with the other participants in this webinar or to the speakers. Please place your questions, that is your questions, in the Q&A feature. We use the Q&A feature to sort the questions. I will try to answer some of the questions during the presentation or answer all questions, or we may answer all the questions during the Q&A period at the end of the webinar. But quite frankly, with the number of registrations we have here, we likely won't be able to get through all the questions. So we ask that you use the Q&A feature. And Amy has agreed to answer some if she can during the program when she's not speaking. And I will do what I can as well, which is, I think a lot of you don't know this, but I was in the water business for a very long time, environmental affairs in the industrial sector up in the Pacific Northwest. So I have a strong background as well, and I can answer some of your questions. Questions about specific situations, especially about your HOA and, is it a non-functional turf or not, are better asked of your attorney serving your association or another appropriate industry professional or agency. In this case, your water agency would be able to address those about your specific situation. We're going to talk a lot about that today. Now, let me direct your attention to your monitors where you will find our standard disclosure or disclaimer statement. None of what is said during the seminar shall be construed as specific legal or expert advice from the speakers, sponsors, or ECHO. If you wish specific advice, we encourage you to contact your attorney or another suitable expert. The information we provide during this webinar is educational in nature and should not be relied upon for specific decision-making purposes. So thank you for that. And this event, as well as all of our events, is made possible by the contributions of our generous professional sponsors. Today's Q&A sponsor is CID Consortium, LLC. Thank you so much to them. Please support all of our professional members and especially our sponsors. They make our educational programming possible at little or no cost to you. And now a bit about today's speakers. Amy Talbot is a Regional Water Efficiency Program Manager at the Regional Water Authority, a nonprofit association representing the interests of Northern California water agencies. Amy is an expert and leader in water efficiency in California and has guided nationally recognized conservation initiatives and outreach campaigns. Her leadership positions include serving on the boards of directors for the Alliance for Water Efficiency, the nation's advocate for water efficient products and programs, the California Water Efficiency Partnership, and the Sacramento Tree Foundation. As manager of RWA's Water Efficiency Program for the past 11 years, Amy has helped to secure and administer over $10.5 million in funding to increase water efficiency in the Sacramento region. Thank you for coming today, Amy. And Zach Castagnola Johnson, Esquire, is a water resource associate attorney at the firm, the BKS Law Firm in Sacramento. Zach focuses on surface and groundwater rights, municipal water supply, water-related legislation or legislative and administrative matters, and other issues faced by public and private water users. Prior to becoming a water lawyer, Zach had a career in the food and wine industry, where his interests in viticulture and agriculture blossomed into a fascination with Western water systems. And so we welcome Zach and Amy today. And Zach, why don't you go ahead and take it away and lead us into the world of water? Take care.
All right. Thanks, Dave. Hi, everyone. I'm Zach Castagnola Johnson. I will be kicking off our presentation today with basically just an overview of the legal and statutory background of the non-functional turf law, which I will refer to mostly as AB 1572 throughout the presentation. So if I'm calling it AB 1572 or NFT for short, that's what I'm talking about. So following my overview, Amy's going to be walking you through the ins and outs of compliance and of implementation. And hopefully at the end of our presentation, we have plenty of time to answer some of your questions, and we'll be doing our best to answer the questions put in the chat throughout the presentation as well. I also have a couple disclaimers because I'm the lawyer and that's my job. So as Dave mentioned, this presentation is for informational purposes only. We're just trying to give you background and facts today from the water supplier perspective and to help you understand the law and comply with the law. So my discussion personally of the law and these legal issues is my best analysis and it's my opinion, not my legal advice. So we recommend that you consult your own legal counsel for advice on complying with the law to your specific situation. And from the outset, I just want to emphasize that these are new and complex regulations. This law is tricky and there's going to be some wiggle room for interpretation. So nothing I say today is going to be black or white. This is all kind of a gray area and we're figuring this out as we go. There's always a chance that this law can change. Someone can sue. The legislature can amend it. So nothing is set in stone, but we're going to give you our best understanding of the law as it currently stands and how it currently applies to you. And then we'll make our general suggestions based on that understanding. So with the disclaimer out of the way, let's dig in. Next slide, please. So how did we get here? AB 1572 was passed to address what the bill's author called, quote, an urgent need for additional efforts to reduce unnecessary water use in urban areas. So we've all heard about this constantly, but this was following the historic drought from 2012 to 2016. And so there was an emergency regulation that was passed in June 2022 in response to the drought. And this law basically expands on that emergency regulation. It simply broadens the definition of non-functional turf a little bit more. That regulation said there was no watering of or just ornamental grass. This law was modeled after Nevada's non-functional turf ban, which was enacted in 2021. That law prohibits the use of Colorado River water to irrigate non-functional turf on a variety of property types. So this was almost a copy paste of the Nevada law. Next slide, please. AB 1572 was approved by Governor Newsom in October of 2023, and it became law on January 1st, 2024. The law has a number of other provisions that you don't really need to worry about. Most important for your purposes are that this bill prohibits the use of potable water, of drinking water specifically, for irrigation of non-functional turf on commercial, industrial, and institutional properties other than a cemetery, and on the properties of HOAs, common interest developments, and community service organizations. This law also has immediate impacts on water suppliers, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the implementation timeline for AB 1572. And we've got it indicated here that the deadline that matters for your purposes is January 1st, 2029. Basically, the legislature built a 5-year delay in for HOAs to come into compliance. So there's a little bit of time left, and we're going to need all of it to understand this law and to come into compliance. And so there is time, but the deadline, as deadlines do, is fast approaching. Next slide, please. All right, so let's dig into the actual text of the law itself. What is functional and what is non-functional turf? So at the bottom of the slides, those are the official statutory definitions, which I'll give you a moment to read. Functional turf, it's defined as a ground cover surface of turf located in a recreational use area or community space. Turf enclosed by fencing or other barriers to permanently preclude human access for recreation or assembly is not functional turf. And non-functional turf is defined as any turf that is not functional turf and includes turf located within street rights-of-way and parking lots. As you can see on this helpful little banner in the upper right of the slide, the general rule, kind of an overly simplistic way to think about this, is that turf only accessed for mowing is likely non-functional. And that is helpful, but it doesn't quite get to the meat of the distinction between these two things. What I want you to notice is that in the definition for non-functional turf, it states that it is any turf that is not functional turf. Super ambiguous, but this is the legislature's way of saying we intend this to be the much broader category. The law was seemingly written so that the non-functional turf definition swallows up everything else that isn't explicitly stated in the functional turf definition, and it appears to add 2 more specific places in which turf can never be functional. That is in street rights-of-way and in parking lots. So even if it would otherwise meet the definition for functional turf, the legislature is saying, well, not in street rights-of-way or parking lots. It can never be functional in those places. So if we look back now at the definition for functional turf, we would expect to see a little bit less ambiguity, but we have these kind of 2 vague terms that were also given: recreational use area or community space. Luckily, the statute provides some definitions for these terms elsewhere. So if we can go to the next slide, we'll pull those up. So community space is defined as an area designated by a property owner or government agency to accommodate human foot traffic for civic, ceremonial, or other community events or social gatherings. So I've put the emphasis on these definitions. I've bolded and highlighted the things that I think you should be paying attention to. So that key language: designated by a property owner or a governmental agency, and the key verb there is designated. That means the person who owns the space can designate it in a certain way. So we'll get into that a little later. Recreational use area similarly means an area designated by a property owner or a governmental agency to accommodate human foot traffic for recreation, including but not limited to sports field, golf courses, playgrounds, picnic grounds, or pet exercise areas. This recreation may be either formal or informal. So the key thing to pay attention to in that second definition is the language including but not limited to. That's, again, we're opening the floodgates for what these things could mean. So the legislature is sending us mixed signals here. This could also be a broad category of things potentially. And so we're left to kind of sort this out. We're being told that non-functional turf definition should be all-encompassing of everything that is not functional turf. But we're also told that recreational use area can mean a bunch of things besides the things that they've got listed, potentially. So we have to kind of read the tea leaves here and do our best to interpret these seemingly conflicting definitions. So the clear signal that I'm getting, my opinion, is that this phrase designated by a property owner is doing a lot of work, and I think that's kind of the key we need to pay attention to, especially since I reviewed the legislative history, And this is something that came up repeatedly. They're concerned about whether a space has a stated purpose of accommodating human foot traffic or recreation and community spaces. They want to be sure that functional turf is something that is used functionally, essentially, and it's designated to be used that way. They're very intent on that designation. So I think there's kind of two main questions you want to ask when you're getting into the scenario of figuring out whether your turf is functional or non-functional. Is one, has my space been designated as functional? Is it a community space? Is it a recreational use area? And two, and that's the second question. Is two, does my space function for community gatherings, for recreation? What is it used for? So what is it? What do we say it's used for, and what is it actually used for? And so we'll get into some of these scenarios now. Let's go to the next slide. So these are some pretty clear examples of functional turf. You see a bunch of different pictures of parks, a cemetery. Remember that cemetery was a specific carve out in the statute. They specifically stated cemeteries are functional turf, even if it doesn't really comply with the other aspects of the definition. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so again, some pretty clear examples. Here we have clear examples of non-functional turf. On the bottom left, you can see turf in a median in the roadway. In the very center, you can see turf in a parking lot. On the top right, left, and the top center, you have turf that seems to be purely ornamental. It doesn't look like it's a gathering space or a community space. You can't play soccer on that turf. And there's just not enough space to do those kind of things, to gather, essentially, or to recreate. Let's go to the next slide, though, because this is where things get a little bit tricky. So here is a picture of RWA's office, and then let's add the little image here. And so we've got a cartoon bench now. Let's pretend this is a real bench, and let's say that RWA puts a sign on this bench that says community gathering bench. Is the turf functional now? My guess is probably not. Still, even if they designate it as a community space, and you could make the argument that that turns this little chunk of turf into a functional turf space. This turf is located in a parking lot, and the statute explicitly called out turf in parking lots and rights of way. So even with a little beautification and the designation, it passes that first question test, but the second test, is this used for recreation or community space? You could say that, but it can't be, because the statute explicitly says you're not able to do that. So in my opinion, this would still be classified as non-functional turf, even if you designated it as functional. The State Water Resources Control Board would say otherwise. All right, let's go to the next slide. So as I mentioned previously, AB 1572 puts the onus on water suppliers to roll this law out on their behalf. And those water suppliers, it defines them as public water systems with 15 service connections or more. And water suppliers under the statute are required to codify these non-functional turf regulations within their own regulations by resolution or ordinance, and to inform their customers about it. So that's something that they need to do as required under the law. You can see here by January 1st, 2027. The law does not allow suppliers to provide a less stringent definition of the relevant terms. For example, even when your water supplier, when your local water supplier is putting its own definition of non-functional turf or functional turf into its regulations or its ordinances, it can't tweak the definition so that its definition is less stringent than the legislature's. It has to be at least as stringent. So there is a situation possibly in which a water supplier could make it a more strict or a more clear definition. So there's a chance that you could get more clarity as your local water suppliers are adopting resolutions and ordinances, putting this law into place. And so this means that there's going to be across the state some varying enforcement strategies and some varying language. Um, while these water suppliers cannot encourage non-compliance or create explicit exemptions from AB 1572, there is a little bit of discretion. The statute only says that they may enforce the statute. They don't. It's not a must. So there's discretion to have a policy of non-enforcement. And there's a little bit of wiggle room in the statute to allow exemptions for things like irrigation for tree health, as you can see there in subdivision B, and health of other perennial non-turf plantings if the immediate need requirement is met. There's also an application process where you can ask for an extension. We'll get into that a little bit later as well. Let's go to the next slide. For water customers, for you, besides the baseline requirement that qualifying entities cease irrigating their non-functional turf with potable water by the applicable date, AB 1572 also explicitly requires that customers certify their compliance with the non-functional turf law every 3 years. That's beginning in June 2030 and ending in 2040. June 2031, my apologies, and ending in 2040. So this is a self-certification process, and there's no guidance on it at this point. The State Water Board hasn't put anything out. So this is something that we're going to be monitoring and that your local water suppliers will be monitoring. So as the time gets closer, as January 1st, 2029 gets closer, there will likely be guidance that comes out, and we'll see how the self-certification process will work. And this is important to get right because non-compliance with these provisions can expose water customers and water suppliers to civil liabilities and penalties. Let's go to the next slide. So this brings us to the question of who's going to be enforcing this law and what does enforcement look like? The primary enforcement entity here is the State Water Board. Like I said, your local water suppliers will be rolling this out and they can enforce AB 1572, but they don't need to do that. You can see that may language there in the statute. The public water systems or municipalities may enforce the provisions of this chapter. And what enforcement looks like, what civil liability looks like under the law is fines of up to $1,000 per day. So depending on your local water supplier's ordinances or resolutions adopting AB 1572, that is going to tell you how stringent enforcement's going to be. And then at this point, we're really not sure what kind of action the State Water Board is going to be taking. So this is another gray area that we're monitoring. According to the legislative history of the law, it was originally the intent of the legislature that beginning in 2030, the State Water Board would begin some annual regional compliance audits, tracking the bill's implementation, and they'd be going through and looking at specific properties and enforcing the law. But that portion of the bill was scrapped in the second version, and it was substituted with these provisions on self-certification. So that tells us that the legislature didn't envision an active oversight entity or that the state board would be roving around and enforcing this law. We don't know exactly why. It's not really indicated in the legislative history. But what we're stuck with now is this wait and see phase while the kinks get worked out. So we've got a compliance deadline approaching on January 1st, 2027. The first of these deadlines hits and compliance with this law will become mandatory. So in the next few months, we're imagining that some of these kinks will get worked out and we'll start to see some answers from the State Water Board or some guidance documents saying what level of enforcement we can expect or just attention to this law we can expect from them. So let's go to the next slide. Wrapping up our general discussion of what this law requires, here are the main takeaways I want you to have. AB 1572 applies to non-functional turf on a handful of different property types which depending on their category, all carry a different implementation timeline. And the law only prohibits the use of potable water to irrigate non-functional turf. If your local water supplier is using recycled water, and that's what you're using to irrigate your turf, you don't have anything to worry about here. So that we urge you, and Amy will get into this in a moment, to coordinate with your local water suppliers. And so if you don't know, you need to reach out to them as soon as you can. And last thing I want you to take away is there are possibly some workarounds here. You can still water trees and non-perennials located in non-functional turf if it's necessary for the health of those plants. And there is a little carve out where you can ask for a 3-year extension. We don't really know what those extensions will require, and we don't have guidance or any form for those yet. So I don't want to be optimistic about that because I just don't know. But those are kind of the workarounds. Otherwise, compliance with this law is going to be mandatory, and it's going to be locally enforced depending on your water supplier. So we urge you, go talk to your water suppliers. And with that, I'll be passing it over to Amy, who's going to talk about compliance and implementation in a little bit more detail.
Hi, everyone. All right, let's go to the next slide. And before we kind of jump in, I just wanted to allow us an opportunity to hear from you. And I wanted to know if what you just heard, what Zach went over, is consistent with what you've been hearing from other sources. You may be talking to a landscaper, you may be talking to your own lawyers. We're just trying to figure out if everyone's trying to say the same thing about the law, to help remove some of the inconsistencies. So everyone at least knows what the boundaries are and what needs to be followed. So if what you just heard was or was not consistent with what you're hearing, we'd love to hear from you in the chat. Just go ahead and just reel on in, and then I'll get a sense of what that is. And then it's a two-part question. Second part is, who is currently your go-to person for the non-functional turf information? Is it a landscaper? Is it an HOA manager? Is it your attorney? Is it your local water provider? So we kind of want to know what information you're getting and where you're getting it from. So I'll allow just a couple more seconds, and feel free to keep on filling it in as I go through the rest of the slides. Next slide, please. Okay, so we went over the basics, kind of what the law is, but I wanted to go over what HOA compliance options are. So as Zach said, the deadline for not irrigating non-functional turf on HOA common areas with potable water needs to stop by January 1st, 2029. So what options do you have between now and that date? Basically, the bare minimum you need to do is stop irrigating turf with potable water, no action needed. You could just stop the irrigation, and then technically you would be in compliance, because that's all the law really requires. The second option is stopping that irrigation and replacing the non-functional turf with non-turf alternatives. Like there's ground cover that look like turf that are low water use, things like that. You could fill it with mulch, rocks, plants, some trees, some pathways, native plants. There's a lot of different options, a mix of all of those. That area could be replaced with basically different types of plant material. Your third option is basically to do nothing, maintain what you're doing already, keep irrigating, and kind of take your chances with enforcement. As Zach was saying, the legislation says that a water supplier, city or county may enforce. We don't know to what extent that's going to be happening with the different water agencies throughout the state. But also keep in mind that the State Water Board can enforce on the water suppliers for not enforcing on HOA customers. So there's kind of two levels of enforcement opportunities. And then the fourth is to contact the State Water Resource Control Board. There is a provision within the legislation itself that says if you can show good cause, which is defined as economic hardship, critical business need, and a potential impact on health and safety, you can ask for an extension for up to 3 years. So again, that doesn't allow you to never comply with it. It just says instead of January 1st, 2029, it's going to be January 1st, 3 years from now. And that gives a little bit more time to plan, to raise funds, to whatever you need to do. And I put the email address there on the presentation if that's the path you would like to choose. So you've kind of got four options that I see as compliance options. Next slide. Okay, so let's talk about what it could look like. So here are some of the plant options that you could. You could take out the non-functional turf. You could put in the first thing up there, kind of looks like turf, but it's ground cover. There's Carapia, silver carpet. There's a ton of alternatives, and we can provide materials on what those are and if they're found locally here. You could make a Waterwise retreat, which is basically low light, drought tolerant plants. There's a whole host of sites, including bewatersmart.info, that have plant databases of different plants you can replace it with. Something that's been really popular the last couple of years is basically building a pollinator garden. So you put in plants that will provide a place for bees and things to do what they do best. You can also put in kind of a privacy screen where you're putting in like larger shrubs in place of the grass to provide a more private space. And then what we're seeing, I would say most often for people that are ripping out turf, especially in commercial and HOA areas, is called slim spaces, which is a combination of kind of select plants and then mulch and rocks and pathways like that. That's typically a lower cost option depending on what plants you choose and can cover larger areas. So if you want to have it still look beautiful and still have live plant material in, there's a lot of different approaches you can take. Of course, all of this costs money, not only to take out the turf, but also to replace it. So, but these are here for you. Next slide. I just wanted to go over a couple of HOA examples that we have at nonfunctionalturfca.org at the website. It's a statewide website. So you can see HOAs that did take this on and did replacements with low water use plants. This is Countrywood HOA in Walnut Creek. You can see the project timeline. It was over a couple of phases in a couple of years. So you could start now and be done by 2029. It was professionally designed, installed, and maintained. The cost was about $4 per square foot. And it's a Waterwise pollinator garden. So this is an option. They did receive a $25,000 rebate from Contra Costa Water District to cover the cost, or at least some of it. And it reduced some of their maintenance hours. So this is what it looked like before, what it could look like, just to give a couple of options. Next slide. And then one more option that you'll see here, Jamaica Park, HOA in San Diego. Again, it's about 58,000 square feet. They had a 80% reduction in water use by replacing with these low water use plants. Similar cost, about estimated $4 to $5 a square foot. And then they received $200,000 in incentives and stacked rebates through various programs. So that's something to keep in mind too. Your local water provider might offer a rebate, but a regional entity above them might offer a rebate, and also some other local groups might as well. Next slide. Okay, so I just wanted to again kind of check in with the group. Now that you kind of know what the compliance dates are, your compliance options, and what it might take to keep living material on property while taking out your non-functional turf, what you know right now and what you've planned so far, do you expect to be in compliant with the non-functional law by January 1st, 2029? And then just throw some answers in the chat. I'm seeing expect to be compliant. Someone mentioned they have 80 acres to convert, which is a lot. Some are saying won't be compliant. So keep reeling those into so we can get a sense of where everyone's at with planning and if they think this is feasible for your HOA. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I wanted to go over a couple misconceptions that we're hearing through the water supplier community who are talking with customers and HOAs like y'all, just to clear up a couple of things. So the law technically does not ban turf. It just says you can't irrigate it with potable water. You can still irrigate it with recycled water, though. So it's not actually banning the plant material itself, it's just the watering of the plant material. You don't have to replace non-functional turf by January 1st, 2029. You just have to stop watering it. So I think a lot of people are like, I have to stop watering it and have a fully installed functional, new landscape or figure out something else by that date. You just have to stop irrigating by that date. So it kind of gives you a little bit more time. So you could just stop irrigating, be in compliance, and then figure out what to do next. It may be over a phased approach. You have to remove all non-functional turf and replace it with this extensive and expensive new landscape. This is not true. Again, you just have to stop watering the non-functional turf with potable water. The law does not state what you have to replace it with. There are some that are very extensive. We're having thousands of plants installed. You're putting in trees, you're putting in, mulch, pathways, everything racks up very quickly. But to be in compliance, you don't need all of that. You just need to stop watering. And then if you so choose, install something that could be a lower cost option like mulch or ground cover that looks like turf, and you can keep irrigating. This law applies to all HOAs and CII properties. There is no size threshold. So that's the truth. It's not just larger developments. If the HOA common area is 20 feet and it's non-functional turf, that's still covered under the law. It's basically any common area and a HOA cannot have non-functional turf. And then finally, this law does not apply to private residential properties, so that's single family homes primarily. And then also apartment and condo complexes that are not part of an HOA are exempt. So multifamily that have common areas, but those common areas are not part of an HOA, then those are exempt. This is kind of a gray area, and kind of a little up for interpretation, but that is the conclusion that we've come to. Next slide. Okay, so what are the challenges that we're facing? And just to be clear, the water agencies are also facing the same challenges, some of the same here, because they have to also get rid of non-functional turf on government buildings, on government agency, school buildings. It's not just HOA, there's a lot of properties that fall underneath this. So we're seeing the same challenges with our own members. The discrepancy between non-functional turf and functional turf definitions. So as Zach went over, if it's a designated recreational area, um, it's considered functional turf. But what makes it a recreational area? Is it I have lunch on the turf once a year, or we have that one crab feed once a year for the community, and we consider that a recreational area? Does that make it functional? Or do I need to have crab feeds there 10 times a year to make it functional and considered a recreational area? Those kind of quantified definitions are not included in this and are up for interpretation. A lot of people think you can just look at non-functional turf. You see, a couple of acres of just grass, you're only on it to mow it. I'm looking at it, it looks like non-functional turf. You can't really tell just by looking at it, except with the exception of, the 1 foot divider in the middle of like a 5-lane highway. We're pretty sure no one's sitting on that. But just an open field, you don't know exactly if it's functional or not. It's really how it's used. Are people on it using it frequently, regularly? Then it's functional. If no one's using it, then it's non-functional. The challenge also is there's going to be varied enforcement throughout the state from local water suppliers and potentially the state. So local water suppliers, cities, and counties are trying to figure out what enforcement means for them. If it's in Nevada, they have a staff of 30, 40 people that enforce their non-functional turf law. I feel like that's somewhat unlikely to happen for a good amount of our water suppliers in the state. But that's in theory an option. Some suppliers may put information about the law on the website, send out a flyer, contact a couple of customers that they think have non-functional turf, and that might be it for now. So it's really kind of up in the air, and that's why it's so important to talk to your local water supplier about what their plans are for enforcement. Rebate funding will not always be available and may be limited and will likely not cover the whole cost of the project. So some agencies rebate funding ebbs and flows. Some years you might get $100,000 for rebates. Some might be $20,000. Some agencies will offer 100 or $1.50 per square foot to take out turf. Other agencies right now in the state are offering $7 because the cost of water greatly varies throughout the state. And we had a focus group earlier in this year, and we talked to some HOA's representatives. Oh my God, hold on. Hold on 1 second. The room just went dark. There we go. Oops. Okay, I'm back. It had the smart lighting that happened to not be so smart. Um, I'm like, where was I? Oh, so we had a focus group earlier this year. We talked to a couple of HOA representatives, and they were saying we would like to have at least 50% of the project costs covered by rebates, which in some cases could be $50 to $100,000. I feel like that's probably unlikely to happen as well. Just to give you some realistic expectations. Generally, when you change landscape plants, you should change and update the irrigation to match the new watering needs of those like more low water use plants. It's not required by the law, but it probably should be done. So if you take out turf and put in, let's say, low water use native plants, typically those will need drip irrigation and not overhead spray. And so you should be changing the plants while you're changing the irrigation to match. That's also an additional cost, and not ideal. But it's also not required. So then maybe that could be a phased in approach, like maybe you do the plants first and then irrigation second, or vice versa. Another challenge is this law may overlap with other landscape related laws. So you have to check your local agencies, local cities, and then water suppliers, as they may have, if you're converting a new landscape and installing something new, sometimes there will be requirements of, a limited amount of plants, or you need to have a certain number type of plants. So you need to check in with your local government and water suppliers to see if this law is going to overlap with putting in a new landscape area. Another thing is that we've seen some resistance from some just residential and commercial customers of wanting to keep their turf. And I imagine HOA homeowners, I'm sure you hear from people saying, I really like that grass and I don't want it to be changed. So I feel like there's going to be resistance from your own members and maybe homeowners. I'm hearing it from just our regular water supplier customers too. And I just want to be clear that we do not know how much water this law will save if implemented properly and fully. That analysis was not done in the process of this legislation. Typically, lower water use landscapes will use 20 to 50% less water than traditional turf, but it has to be managed properly. It has to have the irrigation to match the plant type. And there's a lot of other disclaimers that add into those percentages. So overall, we have no idea how much water this will save. Next slide. Okay, so that was a lot of information, and you might be wondering, where do you start? And I would think the best place for you to start would be to go to your local water provider, or we have this fancy new website that is statewide from our friends at the California Water Efficiency Partnership, CalWEP. It's nonfunctionalturfca.org. And then there are categories for the different types of folks and properties that are covered under this law. And so there's a specific page for HOAs. So I gave you the direct link there that you can go and visit and see a whole host of materials that we'll go over. And next slide. So when you visit this website, there is a spot on the Homeowners Association that says check my property. And you can click that. Next slide. And you'll basically go through a series of questions that says, do you have this? Do you have this? Do you use it for recreation? Do you use recycled water on it? It's basically a bunch of questions that walk you through something that says, okay, this is likely non-functional, or this is likely functional. So you can go there, check your property. It'll give you a distinction of what they think it is. Of course, we don't know for sure, but it's just trying to help you whittle down your options and if it's functional or not. Next slide. And then there's also, if your property comes up as non-functional, then there's a whole series of resources there for you. There's a general fact sheet. There's a guide for identifying non-functional lawn. There's tips on getting started on, okay, I have non-functional turf. What do I do with that? There's the couple case studies that I went over as well. And then there's the lawn alternative, the quick reference guide. So if you're like, I want something green still, but I want it to look like grass, but it can't be grass, what do I do? Next slide. There's also communication materials there. If you wanna send out a newsletter article, you can say, here's some cut and paste text. You're like, hey, community, here's what's going to be happening. Here's why we're doing it. Here's the law that's passed. Let us know if you have any questions. So you basically it's kind of cut and paste where you fill in the blanks and send it out. And then you can modify as you see fit. Next slide. And then if you want to know about your specific property for sure, or not for sure, but if you just want to look at your own property, you can put your own address in there, or the HOA's address or a general address that y'all use, and then click the Make a Plan button. Next slide. And then it'll say, okay, your water district is Sac Suburban Water District. Here are the rebates that are offered to you. And then other pertinent information about compliance and enforcement when those do get updated. So you can check your specific HOA and HOA property. Next slide. And then also a map pops up. And so you can use the tool to actually draw what you think might be non-functional turf to get a sense of what the size is to help when you're planning for projects. So you basically go there, put your address in, you find out who your water provider is, you find out what money's available, you find out enforcement, and then you can map out a plan for that. You would take all that information, go back and work with your HOA community and the structure you have to say, okay, here's the basics, what can we do about it? And maybe get some bids on work that could be done or discuss the options, the 4 options we talked about. Next slide. And then there's also just general guidance information about the law itself, not just HOA focused. So if you have more questions or you're like, what exactly what this law says, kind of in a little less detail than what we went over earlier in the thing, you can have that here. There's also Spanish translation and video starting soon, but this was the first kind of push of getting information out there. Next slide. Okay, so again, I wanted to hear from y'all and put your answers in the chat. Do you plan to, or have you already contacted your local water supplier about non-functional turf compliance and enforcement? Please put your answers in the chat so we can kind of see. Yes, plan to. We have not. Okay. It's kind of coming in. And definitely use that website that we put in there that's linked in the chat. If you don't know who your water provider is and you don't know the details about it, you can start there. And at least when you talk to them, you'll have a baseline of information. Being like, we think we have this many square feet of non-functional turf. We are interested in the rebate. What options do I have? Okay, next slide. So in summary, this is confusing. This is confusing for a bunch of us, and we're all trying to figure out what it means, not only for the water supplier community, but for the water supplier customers, HOA properties, commercial businesses, schools, institutions. We're trying to work with all the groups that are underneath this law to try to figure out how we're going to comply with it. Not just us, but all, HOAs, customers, everyone. So there's still a lot to nail down. Like Zach said earlier, we've been doing our best to interpret what the law means and work through those nitty-gritty details. But there's still a lot that's unknown. But I just wanted to reinforce we're all in this together. Like we're going through the same compliance issues and options and wondering where we're going to find money to change out the landscapes and public properties too. And there's basically some mixed messaging already that I've been hearing of from different landscape companies, even some government groups, talking about what the law is and what it's not. So it can be very confusing, and that's why it's really important to just understand what the law says and what you have to comply with and not. It's not a ban on turf, it's a ban on irrigating the turf, and the deadlines. You don't have to have a fully installed functional new landscape by that January 1st, 2029 deadline. You just have to stop irrigating by then. And then I think it's an important discussion to have with your HOA of what you can do to comply or not if that's what you choose to do. And again, I would just say contact your local water supplier for more information. And then I think the best thing, if you don't know where to start, is to go to this website and then enter your HOA property address and kind of go down that chain of different resources that we just went through. So, next slide. Okay, so before we open up to questions, I wanted to just do kind of a rapid fire summary of questions to get us started. So some of this we learned during the presentation, but I just want to reiterate it. Can you still water trees located in non-functional turf areas with potable water? And the answer is, should be the next click. Yes, you still can water trees with potable water, but the law says only to the extent needed for the health of the tree. Typically, this is interpreted as the area under the tree canopy. So like the ends of where the tree branches go, and then directly down to the ground is considered the tree canopy area. And that is the area that's thought to provide like basically the watershed or the watering ground to work towards the health of the tree. So you can still water that area in theory with potable water, but just putting a tree in like 2 acres of grass and then saying it's functional because the tree's there is not in line with the legislation. Next slide. How can I make my turf grass functional? It's like, how do I make this non-functional turf functional? Is the easiest thing, the easiest option sometimes when you're thinking through this. And the state basically says only turf located in a recreational use area or community space might qualify as functional turf. So that space either needs to be one of those two things to be functional. You can't just say, oh, it's functional for another reason. Next slide. Who decides if turf is functional or not? And the answer is the state of California has decided that through the passage of AB 1572, but local water supplier cities and counties were tasked with interpreting the state's definition, and that's where the gray area is. But technically, if you go to the water provider and you say, is this functional and non-functional, the water provider should be looking at the definitions and seeing if it fits within that definition. And that's all the leeway they really have. Next slide. Does this law apply to turf irrigated with recycled water? And the answer is no. You may continue to irrigate functional turf with a You may continue to irrigate functional and non-functional turf with recycled water. So recycled water areas are totally exempt from this whole thing. Next slide. What about dog parks and relief areas? Are they functional turf or non-functional turf? And the answer is generally, we would say it's functional turf. However, it has to be a designated and fenced area. So it has to be an actual, like, designated, maybe fenced area with a sign with the little baggies. It needs to be like official. It can't just be like that field out back that's, an acre away. We unofficially use that as a dog area. Next slide. Does the state provide any funding to help implement 1572? And the unfortunate answer is no, it does not. There is no state funding, and there is no plan to have state funding to help fund any of these transformations. And local water suppliers are also having to do their own transformations, but also, expected to provide funding to the customers that are under the bill. So there's not enough money to fully implement this and have all the costs covered. It's just not going to happen. Next slide. And so with that, I think Zach and I wanted to open it up to hear your questions. I tried to answer some in the Q&A, but those that we didn't get to, let's get to now.
All right, everybody, that's fantastic. I want to say that we're in a Q&A session right now, and we're excited to have these two experts here to help us navigate the shoals of water. And I'd like to say that CID Consortium is the one that's made this possible today, and they're the sponsors of today's session. And I want to give you one takeaway from my perspective, and that is working with your local water agency is absolutely quintessential. That is the place to go. They're in the boat with you. It's expensive for them. They have to implement it everywhere. They may not have the infrastructure in place to do this. So they're trying to figure out ways to make this happen. And it's not just HOA, so don't feel singled out there. It's going to be a lot of different things. Your local church, for example, is going to have to comply with non-functional turf, and that I know is going to be a very difficult thing for them to do. So there are a lot of eggs in the same basket, and it's going to be a difficult program to implement. As time goes on, I'm sure there'll be more decisions made, a little more clarity as things settle out. And hopefully maybe there's some amendments to allow for planning. There is a small exception here. You can have multiple years of planning, but it's a difficult process to get there. So I want to say thank you to you too. And let's go ahead and I'm going to ask those of you that are listening to the event to go and place your questions in the Q&A feature. That's on the bottom of your screen, a little icon there with a question mark. Put your questions in there. We only have 16 questions right now, which is not very many. So put your questions in there if you wouldn't mind. And then use the thumbs up icon to pick your favorite questions. Unfortunately, we probably don't have time to go through all the lengthy questions, and I'm going to ask you not to ask too specific a question. Try to keep it general. We have a lot of people online. We want to keep them general questions, and we definitely don't want to get into too much specificity, and we don't want to have to read 3 or 4 paragraphs of question. So anyhow, let's go ahead and do that. And we'll take our first question here. I'm going to pull up mine.
I've been hammering away at the questions in the
Oh, awesome. Okay.
Q&A while Amy's been talking. Um, and there are a couple that have come up multiple times. So I can just at the outset while everyone's putting their questions in, I'll just answer those for everybody.
Perfect. Thank you.
A really good question that we got was about common area exclusive use portions of HOAs and whether exclusive use areas are subject to AB 1572. And the answer is no. An exclusive use area is not subject to the law. The law defines common areas as not those areas that are assigned or allocated to the exclusive use of the occupants. So if you have in front of your house, you have a common area exclusive use, and if you don't, then it's not subject to the law. However, if you don't know, or your HOA does the maintenance there, you're not sure, reach out to them because they will provide clarity on how that's designated. So that was a great question and something that I should have covered earlier. So thank you to the people who asked that. Another one that came up multiple times was what does turf actually mean? What do we mean? Is it grass? Is it vines? So turf means a ground cover surface of mowed grass. And it gives us a list of the types of grass. Annual bluegrass, Kentucky bluegrass, perennial ryegrass, red fescue, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So ground cover surface of mowed grass is what we're talking about with turf. And I see that we've got a lot more questions. So
Okay, so let's go ahead and go to the top. The most upvotes, hit your refresh button, and we have a lot of grass and a lot of children. Okay, I just lost it. Hold on. We have a lot of grass and a lot of children. Can we justify the grass as a play area? To use it.
If it's a designated recreational use, then it would be functional. So if kids are playing on it, if it's a playground, then it's functional. It's a basic use. Zach, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if it's not called that, then I would recommend maybe saying this is a play area. Put a sign up that says it's a play area, or put it in documentation somewhere. This is a play area, and if kids are playing on it, then it would likely be functional turf.
Mhm.
But remember, the designation thing is important. So say that it's designated for recreation.
There you
Right.
go.
If you have like a HOA map, you can designate those areas, like this area is where we play. This is where we have our barbecues, things like that.
Okay, well, that's a good answer. I think that's a hopeful answer for a lot of folks. Our water agency does not offer non-potable water for irrigation. What can we do? That's a question we have with a lot of people.
So I would say most agencies don't offer recycled water as an option, and only a subset of properties are piped with recycled water, even if an agency does have it. So in that case, you would have to go down the other path of not irrigating with potable water and then either replacing it with a ground cover or mulch or something like that. So recycled water is not going to be an option or a compliance option for a good portion of the state.
Mhm.
Gosh, again.
And one of the things you may consider in that regard is if your community is large enough, is putting in reclaimed water from runoff or whatever, and you can put swells in and collect some water. And I'm not sure about the groundwater rules down here in California, but there are options that you might take a look and ask. You can try to be creative and have a different water source. Um, Let's see. Okay, Linda. Oh no, anonymous attendee. Is the area of tree canopy based on the young tree or young new tree, or can it be the area of a mature tree canopy? So it's a time question.
Right. I mean, there is no official guidance on this. I just want to be clear. And there is no official guidance on saying it's only the tree canopy area. The legislation only says the area of grass that is to the extent that is needed to be watered for the health of the tree. So I can't really answer that question more than that, but that's what the legislation says.
Yeah, wouldn't
We're
it be
trying, go ahead.
wouldn't it be important to ask your agency when you're developing your plan?
Yeah, so your agency, like your local water agency, may further um, kind of define what the health of the tree means. Some are choosing to do that, some may not be, but you could ask the local water agency in your area if they have a different definition for that or what their interpretation of that part of the law is.
Mhm.
So,
And I'm going to keep pushing on talk to your agency. That I think that's the critical part of this. And the more HOAs that are speaking to their agency, that may inform the agency better about how to work with the HOAs and the dynamics that we're facing. We have a lot of expenses that have come up, especially. I mean, I'm looking. I'm on my board, and we're increasing our pavements. We're replacing our pavement, and the cost of doing that has doubled, and we just don't have it in our reserves. And so letting your water authorities know about those dynamics is probably a good thing. They're going to have to comply just like you are, but we should do that. Okay, let's look at this from Annie, or Ann, I guess it is, DeBach. And in many areas around our buildings, the alternative of mulch planting do not align with or does not align with impending 0 to 5 ember-free zone, so conflict with the fire laws, which is looming in our future through state initiative, which, like NFT, are also not yet fully fleshed out, but have impending deadlines and repercussions for the HOA. We're going to see this a lot.
yeah, I mean, that's the thing I was talking about, the overlapping local ordinances that overlap with this. So there's the fire escaping, stormwater management, There's a lot of things when you update and have a new landscape that you need to consider. And so for those areas, you may not be able to use mulch, within that certain time, 0 to 5 feet. You may need to have rocks, but you can have mulch a little bit further out, or you can put plants in there. Um, it just, there's a lot of things to consider, and that's why I think it's important to potentially hire a professional that can help plan all these out and then contact your water agency to see what laws would apply where and make sure that whatever plan you come up with is going to be able to comply with multiple things. I live in the foothills and I have some of the same issues with my own landscape. So I have basically pavers for the first 2 feet away from my house, and I have mulch after that. So it's a lot to there's a lot of layers to think about here, especially because in certain cases, or if you choose to comply with doing a new landscape, there's a lot of new things that get triggered.
Okay, yeah, and that's a really good advice too. We're going to have as HOAs, uh, consider your reserve studies as well, because this should be a reserve study item. And the other factor I'd like you to consider is the ongoing cost of whatever you do to make a change out away from non-functional turf, because you may be stepping from one situation and getting into just the frying pan to the fire, so to speak. So you want to watch that and make sure you're doing a good job of managing that. The next question here from Annie Watson. Does a dog area absolutely need to be fenced? Well,
No,
no. Okay, there you go.
not as I read the statute. There may be other laws locally that require a dog area to be or a pet area to be fenced, but under AB 1572, that can qualify as a recreational use area regardless of whether or not it's fenced. But that again, local municipal ordinances about what is and what is not a pet use area will apply.
Yeah,
Okay.
Zach, isn't the priority that it's designated?
Yeah, the priority, it just says pet exercise areas. It doesn't say whether it's fenced or not. And so if it's a pet exercise area, if it's called a pet exercise area or dog park or whatever, um, then it's probably functional turf.
Okay, I can tell you too, this is where it gets really confusing because I can tell you right now, some agencies are choosing to say it needs to be fenced and designated. So, here's where we get to it really depends on your local water provider and how they're interpreting it and working with your city and contacting them because the law has its basics, but then it's being interpreted as best as people can, at the local level.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And
and
this,
locally it can be more stringent. So what we've gone
Right.
over today is that is the
Yes.
base, and it can get more stringent depending on where you're located. So that's you need to definitely pay attention to those local laws because that's going to be where the rubber meets the road.
yeah, and I think most agencies uh, don't don't understand how associations work, how nonprofits or the HOA works, in that it is not a civic entity, it is not a government, it is a private entity, and it's difficult, as you know, as a volunteer board. We're not getting paid to run those boards, and we are being there's a lot of unfunded mandates that are coming down the pike that are require our homeowners to pay for, and we just went through this whole balcony inspection phase and millions of dollars out the door. And that was a little we didn't know about it. I mean, it just came up, and then we had the hyperinflation during the COVID, and that hurt. Now we have other issues that we're dealing. We don't have the taxing authority. We don't have an authority to tax, and we don't have access to government funds because we're a private entity. And I think helping some of the agencies understand that, and that we need more time to execute this. I think everybody agrees with the ethic, to save water. It's just we need time to figure out how to implement. All right, let's go ahead and move on. That's my soapbox for today. David Yamashiro, can the board just say a grass turf area is functional by placing park benches, tables, trash containers in the area or whatever. So this is we're getting to trying to get to solutions here. I think we answered this one maybe.
Yeah, no. They can designate it as functional, but if it's not used as a community gathering space or recreational or for recreational use, uh it's not functional turf. So it's both the designation and the actual use. And if it's in a parking lot or if it's on a right of way, it can never be, no matter how it's designated. So it depends on the designation and the use itself.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's going to be some case law on this that helps define things.
Hopefully.
Um, let's see, William Fisher, got your tree answer. Same question about low water plants. You can put low water plants in there for sure. Maybe you talk now. Now's the time probably to say something about native plants.
Yeah, I mean, and native plants and low water use plants are options that you can put in there along with mulch, and rocks and other organic materials. Um, it's kind of up to you, like what kind of look you're going for, how much maintenance you have. In theory, low water use plants have less maintenance once they're established, so it could actually cut down on maintenance costs. It could cut down on water use, which could cut down on water bills. So all of those things are options. It really depends. Again, the law doesn't say what you have to replace it with. It just says that you can't water the non-functional turf. So I mean that's something that we would promote as water suppliers is planting native plants and low water use plants, totally outside of this law. We think those are good things to have in your yard. And they have multiple benefits with, pollinators and all the good things that come along with having a variety of plants in your yard.
Okay, that's good. Good answer. Dale Hudson is here, and I encourage the listeners to vote uh, on which question they want. We live in a high risk fire zone. Mulch is a problem from this perspective. It catches on fire, obviously. What is the best alternative to mulch, which seems to be the default recommendation?
I mean, I mean, I understand the issue, like mulch is not great for every situation. But also I kind of hesitate to say just put rocks in because now you're replacing a live, cooler landscape area with something that's going to be hot in the summer and put off a lot of heat. So I don't think just substituting one thing out for the other is necessarily great. Depending on what soils you have, I would entertain a ground cover, a non-turf ground cover that looks like turf, functions in a lot of ways like turf, but is still allowed to be irrigated with, under the compliance of this law. I think would be the best without seeing the property and knowing the details. Just in general, that's what I would recommend versus putting in rocks or a paved way or something like that, is to try to keep whatever you're taking out to be close enough to what you're replacing it with. You don't want to take out, 50 acres of green space and just pave it over because now you're creating a whole other host of issues.
Okay, and that's a good question because it's one that we face all the time too, is that a lot of folks are just pulling out their gardens or their grass, their turf, and they're doing hardscape. And I get a little nervous about that because the hardscape then doesn't allow for percolation into the beta zone or below and into the groundwater. And do you have any, I mean, suggestions? I mean, that's one of the alternatives. It's probably the least costly for some of these communities.
I totally agree. From my perspective, if I was in this situation as an HOA and had limited funds, I would look at ground cover first. That way you can keep some of the same irrigation depending on what you put in, and it would be minimal changes, maybe some tweaks, maybe you water it a couple times less. And it still looks and sometimes can function just like, traditional turf. RWA we have a whole, I don't know, it's like a table and a flyer of non-turf options that are specific for the Sacramento area, but really could be relevant statewide. I'll put that in the chat, or we can also have as a follow-up resource. Crappie has been pretty popular over the years. There's a couple of other options. There's some that look like clover, so it kind of looks like four-leaf clover with little white flowers. There's some attractive options, and depending on how they're implemented, can be very low cost because you're using seed, not actually like grown plants that you're getting, which can be very expensive.
So Amy, let me ask you the question then. If you have turf and you want to transition that and you stop the potable water completely and then to comply with the law, the turf, some of the turf potentially could continue to live for a long period, except in the hot. A lot of folks are on this webinar are in pretty wet areas, and that might be a solution as well. What are your thoughts of that? And then I was thinking overseeding maybe with some of these other plants that are, clover is one that's not doesn't fall under this law. Is that an option, or what's your thoughts on that? Am I just pipe dreaming it?
I mean, I think the idea is that you don't want to have any turf left, so you could do something like sheet mulching or something to kill the entire lot of turf and then recondition the soil and then replant. I think it's going to be hard to try to layer in multiple seeding or overseeding, just to try to like have the new stuff take over because grass is pretty hardy. It does come back. So I would recommend just trying to totally get rid of the turf grass and then starting fresh
Mhm.
if possible. I mean, if I don't think no one's gonna come and be like, I saw three blades of grass. How dare you? I feel like that's unlikely, but I think the intent is to have a fully planted substitute, which is the non-turf
Well,
ground
the
cover.
the intent is to not use potable water, isn't that? That's
Yes,
really the intent.
that
So
is the not no potable water on turf grass. But you can use potable water on the landscape still.
yeah, okay. So if you stop the use of potable water and you leave your turf, 8 months out of the year you can have, or 10 months out of the year you can still have your turf, and it's maybe brown, but it
Yeah.
that works, and it solves the problem of being able to afford it, and then you can transition your communities into these, plant trees, you can do whatever, and then get rid of the turf at some point. What happens with the water that because everybody says the turf is so bad, but is the water that the grass is using, it does not stay, is it being transpired into the atmosphere, and that's the issue, or uh does it go back into the soil at some point and hold back the water, so you have some sequestration of the water in the soil, and then it's released later in the year, and it helps your hydroflow, right?
Yeah, depending on your soil type, that could be true. Not every area is like percolating down to the groundwater level. Some of it just gets absorbed back in the atmosphere. But I mean, you're right. Like if you could just have turf and stop watering it and see what happens and see if it's more an aesthetic thing at that point rather than a functional, non-functional thing. You're just like, we'll let it see what it does naturally, and some parts may dam, some parts might not. But I mean, in theory, you're complying with the law that way.
Okay. Well, that's just something, I'm trying to think of some creative solutions here, especially given the cost factor of so many of our HOAs. It's a tough bit. It's a bitter pill, frankly.
Definitely. I mean, I would just be careful to really not water in the summertime because if you're saying you're not watering it and it's green in the middle of summer, people are going to be like, we know you're watering it. But like, the shoulder months, you could say is rain that's like naturally keeping the grass alive.
Yeah,
So at least for the Sacramento area, that would be true because we would know anything that's alive in the summer is definitely getting irrigated.
well, I'm thinking of Mount Shasta, or the Shasta Reservoir and Oroville. You've got reservoirs. A lot of our communities have reservoirs on site, and
Hmm.
they potentially could leverage the reservoirs as a way to fill in those months, and otherwise not. So, I mean, there are things to do that may be a little bit difficult, but there are solutions if you really think about it. Let's go to William and Fisher. 135 townhomes, lots of children, grass in front, and many homes. Can we consider this functional? I think we answered that one, didn't we? Yeah.
Yeah, it depends on if it's an exclusive use area or if it's common area, and that's based on your individual HOA. So you'll have to talk to your HOA.
Okay, so I'm going to take one more here, and then I'm going to go into our outro. Connor and I will be staying around. I don't know if Amy, you're at a conference. I don't know if you have time to hang out, but
Yeah,
and
well,
Zach, you too. So
Yeah, I will
we'll
have
see
to
if the
run.
light,
you'll have
yeah, I
to
was like,
run.
we'll see if the light turns off on me again.
Okay, we're good there. So let's go ahead and take this last one from June Cooley. I think that is my last one. You keep mentioning designation. Does this have to be something in writing to meet, to be compliant?
That's a
Uh,
gray area. Right, putting things in writing can never hurt. So I mean, some of our suggestions are putting up a little sign, changing it on a map of the HOA. You know, designating it means sort of putting it somewhere, and I think it implies in writing. But yeah, I think there are multiple ways to designate something. So a little plaque, a sign, changing it on a map. Um, yeah, how people refer to it. I don't know. It's not clear, but I think the real thing that matters is, besides designating it, is how it's actually used. So you can call it something, but that doesn't change whether or not it's functional.
Okay, sounds good. Do you have a last word, Amy and Zach?
I mean, I would feel like I just want to echo what you've been saying, which is contact your local water agency if you have any questions in your local government to see what applies to you. Because, we're just telling general things right now and to the best of our knowledge, but the buck's going to stop at what's locally enforceable.
Thank
And
you.
then I would go to the nonfunctionalturfca.org to learn more and go through those resources we had. I love that you can put your own address in and the map pops up and you know who your water provider is and you know their rebates. I feel like that's half the battle right there. And then taking it, which direction you want from that point on.
Yeah. Zach?
Yeah, I think using those resources that Amy has shared is the best thing to do. Contacting your local water supplier, and it looks like I'm seeing in the chat that people are saying a lot of communities will be making lots of new designations going forward. I think that's a great idea. I think getting active, doing things now, and taking action while you have time. We've got 3 years, 3 years and a month about. So getting active now, looking at your community map and finding these kind of creative solutions we've outlined. It's like, yeah, ripping up everything and then replanning it. That's a huge ask. It'll cost you a lot of money, but there's some creative solutions here. So take advantage of those. And yeah.
Good. That's great. Well, I think the two of you have been outstanding, and we appreciate everything that you're saying to the community. I find this to be a challenging, but it's a progressive opportunity for our HOAs. But I also hear the pain of having to pay for this, and we're just coming through. We're getting hit with a lot of additional costs, and I know how hard that is for so many communities, especially those that are on fixed incomes. This is going to be a challenge. I, as an HOA guy, I would suggest our communities to put together a committee to deal with this issue as soon as you possibly can, and try to get a local, a community expert on working on this issue alone. It will help you in the long run. So thank you so much. And I'm going to go ahead and close this out. If Amy and Zach, you can leave at any time or you can hang out. I'm going to talk a little bit about what Echo does and where we're going. So thank you again. Appreciate everything you've done.
All right.
And
Thank
again,
you so
thank,
much.
okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us to do this. We love to talk about this stuff, and I'm glad that Zach can join me as well to give
Yeah.
the illegal advice or approach.
And we'll, so you're going to be writing an article for us and for the Insight next month, I think, or the month after maybe. So pretty soon.
Yes.
Okay.
More of the same, just in a written form.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you so much.
All right,
Thanks,
thanks.
y'all.
Bye,
Take care, guys.
everyone.
Bye-bye. Okay, I want to thank everybody else for coming today, and especially our members. We appreciate your support and continued ongoing participation in our webinars. Thank you to everyone who's been here. And I know we had some landscaping companies and some attorneys on this particular webinar. It's good to see you here as well. Thank you. For those of you who are not ECHO members, please consider becoming a member and supporting our ongoing HOA programming. And especially helping our HOA boards do better, and manage better communities throughout the country. We have folks from all over the country that participate in our webinars, so thank you so much for that. To join, simply go to www.echo-ca.org and click on the membership tab. It's so easy, and we would definitely appreciate it. The more members, the better off we are in terms of our advocacy and our programming, our educational programming. ECHO members, thank you again for supporting us, and please invite your friends, neighbors, and especially your management firms and vendors to join ECHO. We again appreciate them. Simple invitation is usually all it takes. If you would like to become more involved with ECHO, please consider joining our volunteer corps. As part of the volunteers, you will have a few opportunities where we could use your help and maybe use some of your talents and help us out. Please refer to the slide. It should be going up on. It should be up actually on your screens now. I'm looking for some people that can help with social media as well and some of our other editing and writing responsibilities. We do have those coming up. So thank you for if you're interested. Just send me an email at dzapponi@echo-ca.org, or you can talk to Connor. Now for our other announcements. The ECHO HOA University has an educational program focused on HOA board preparedness. The core curriculum of 10 courses is designed for high quality training and is available for HOA board members, interested homeowners, and professionals. Your participation in this program will earn you a certificate of HOA board member preparedness. The courses are offered live online. They're offered live online, and most courses are recorded and available on demand. If you or someone you know wants to enroll in the certification program, please send an email to Connor and he'll set you up. His email address is on the screen. Here is a preview of our resource panels starting back in January next year. Save the date panels so that you will be able to attend those particular meetings. Sacramento Resource Panel is in Roseville, and that's Tuesday, January 20th. We have the Rossmore program on the 21st. We have the East Bay program on the 22nd. And then Wine Country Resource Panel will be, and that's in Santa Rosa, will be January 27th. The North Bay Resource Panel will be the 27th as well. The San Francisco Resource Panel will be January 27th in the evening. So we look forward to seeing you there. I think we may have one date. I think it's the 26th for the Wine Country Resource Panel and not the 27th as it says on here. Let's see. We have 3 large in-person meetings planned for 2026 with multiple speakers and many professional exhibitors. Save the dates. Here they are. NorCal Seminar is June 13th. The Southern California Seminar is September 19th. And the Legislative Update is November 14th. Again, thank you to Zach and Amy for being here today and presenting. I thought they did a wonderful job. And of course, thanks to all of you for attending today and making this a successful event. ECHO appreciates your investment in education to foster a better quality of life in HOA communities, and that's our mission.